Hey everybody, welcome back to Super Monkey Fighters, What Would You Change movie podcast. I am Loki here with Monkey Feathers and Papa Nugget. This week on our podcast, we're going to be talking about The Martian from 2015, starring Matthew Damon, or Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, Kristen Wiig, Jeff Daniels, Michael Peña, Sean Bean, Kate Mara, Sebastian Stan, Aksel Hennie, Chiwetel Ejiofor. Continuing the list, because this movie doesn't end when it comes to cast and crew. Benedict Wong is in it, as well as Mackenzie Davis, Donald Glover, Nick Mohammed, and Shu Chen. Other notable, crew about this with this movie is directed by Ridley Scott, written by Drew Goddard and Andy Weir, who also wrote the novel that it is based on. If you don't know what the movie is about, it is an astronaut becomes stranded on Mars after his team assume him dead, and he must rely on his ingenuity to find a way to signal Earth that he is alive. There's a few things I'm kind of mixed on. Usually I'm kind of, I like this, I don't like this, I'd change this. But there's a couple of things I'm really mixed on. So I do really like the characters that they put together. They are very cliched outside of Matt Damon's character, Mark Watney. But I do really like Mark Watney's, I think his reaction to being stranded on Mars is to vlog his experience and his survival routine. I think I just like that sense of humor that he puts into it. I do like that it is more science-based fiction. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call this like they do base everything in science, but it is still a very fictionalized movie. Like, there is still MacGuffins or technology that is almost real, kind of a thing. I've seen they talk about the oxygenator. That's not a thing that really exists, but it is a thing that NASA is working on and testing. I've actually seen videos where they're doing something similar to where they can generate oxygen for long-term journeys, those kinds of things. So I do really enjoy that aspect of it. I really love long opening shots that establish scenes, especially long sweeping landscape shots are just amazing and gorgeous, and that'll always kind of set me up for a movie. But these ones where they move, like it's establishing that it's Mars right off the bat, it just didn't quite jive too well with me. So I liked, like I said, mostly just the science-based stuff. It's science nerd fan fiction. Is one of the people who's really excited every time a rocket goes into space and watches all the live streams. This is the kind of stuff that I eat up. So I like it. It's more of a modern survival story, right? It's you don't get a good look in his mind when he's kind of realizing that he's alone, and you can kind of tell he's weighing the decision of what to do. And it kind of ends with him saying, "I'm not going to die here." And then he gets to work and starts doing things. I like that that's the approach that he took, where it was just like, no, just keep moving forward, do one foot in front of the other, which is ultimately like the end of the movie kind of lesson that he imparts, right? Is you solve one problem and you move on to the next, right? Otherwise you're just going to die. Like, either you accept it or you do something about it. You get to work. And I just think that approach is awesome. It's one of the things I really like about it. Like I said, just the sense of humor that he has is great. The banter back and forth where it's just sarcasm.
You actually hit a lot of what I did like, which is simply, I liked the science behind this movie. I liked that it was this astronaut / scientist who was using his skills to survive. It wasn't just, oh, it's a miracle and he has all his food and he just needs to ration it out until the end. No, he had to figure out a way to grow more. He had to figure out a way to get water. He had to figure out a way to essentially build this, essentially like a greenhouse, because he's growing all his plants. But he's using science to figure it out. And it's, as you had mentioned, that he mentions at the end of the movie, where it's one problem, you work on it, and then you move to the next. and it's the next problem, you work on it, you move to the next. I liked that he was using vlogs to document his time.
Yeah.
And that he didn't know if he was going to survive, but it was going to be a document of his efforts and his maybe survival, maybe not, but for the people who came to Mars after him.
Well, and it's like Wilson in Castaway, right? It's that it's instead of creating or using an inanimate object and personifying it to talk to and keep sane, he talks to cameras because they're everywhere. So
and it then drove
the movie,
and then it drove home his ability to potentially survive by him then teaching future astronauts to potentially survive in life-threatening situations, or at least situations similar to what he was in. Well,
I think that's a very fitting kind of career end for that character, because really he's just that I want to be cool science teacher. Like that's why he's doing the vlogs and talked about being a space pirate and all those kinds of things, because like those are the kinds of things that your nerdy science teacher would talk about, that was a good teacher and everybody liked, but that's what it was.
So this is the second time I've watched this, and I was trying to think back on when I first watched it and what I thought at the time. For the fact that I don't really remember is not a good indicator of how I felt about it. And I think on paper, this is a movie I should like this is right up my alley. But overall, I do not like this movie. I thought the Mars scenes, all those shots were awesome. I thought they were filmed very well. They looked great. They really felt immersive, like you were there on Mars. Even the space scenes, there was nothing that really took you out. And it felt really clean, crisp, and very detailed. I do think a lot of the things you said, both of you, I agree with for the most part. I mean, I'm not going to get real nitpicky on anything specific. It is way too long, at least for the story. I was so bored out of my mind watching this show. So bored. I don't even know if I remember all of the parts because I was constantly thinking about other things. It could not hold my attention to save my life.
Yeah. While he was watching it, he was texting the two of us goofy things about the movie. So that's how much it kept his attention.
And then because we weren't answering him back, his final response was, "You guys are no fun."
Yeah.
As though we're supposed to be the entertaining ones for what he's supposed to be watching.
And to kind of put the entire timeline of the movie on how I see it is, I think where it started was great. It started off at a good point, but it didn't get better from there. I like the idea that they try and make Matt Damon out to be like the hero, right? Or at least someone that is struggling through this nearly impossible situation, being stranded on Mars. In which he starts out and he at least has the skills to do it. I mean, that's what they were trying to make him out to be, was the hero. And I think that started out okay, but they kind of just let it fall apart because we can only watch him for so long being like, yep, I'm going to science the shit out of this and I'm just so awesome and I can just do anything. And then when he did have a problem, it was usually like, okay, I had a problem. All right, I'll move back and I'll fix it and do that, right? That's great, right? That seems like a very capable person. It's really boring as a character to watch someone that has all the answers to everything and can just figure it out.
Yeah, even when he blew himself up trying to make oxygen, right? He instantly knew what his problem was and instantly had a solution to it.
Right. And so I think that works for a little bit to establish kind of the capabilities he has as a character, but you can't build an entire movie on that. There has to be more elements. And I think that's where it starts to fall apart.
there's a lot of redundancy in there where they're showing a lot of bad that happens early on, and then like time jumps 7 months and nothing's happened.
Well, I don't
And-
imagine there's a whole lot that really could happen because ideally he's trying to either survive or wait for some type of rescue or
Yeah.
more supplies.
But
So-
it's there are things where they, you don't assume that like he just sat there for 7 months. Like stuff was going on, but like there's big things going on the first half of the movie where he's figuring out, he's solving problems, he's doing every day there's something new he's got to come up with. And I think that's one of the bigger problems I have with it, with the middle being just kind of boring. By the time you get to the end, it kind of clicked with me where I was like, this was a movie rooted entirely in science and thinking through problems and figuring out solutions to them that were really smart. And then the end of the movie is just like thriller action movie. Let's do the stupidest, craziest, ridiculous thing that's movie interesting, right? And that's where I say it's science. It's based in science, but it's completely fictitious. Like, he cuts his suit so that he can use that as thrust to get himself to the other spaceship, even though the commander is in a jetpack and could just fly to him and back. Like, she has thrust, she has the capability of doing that. Where,
Well, he wanted to Iron Man it out there.
Yeah, and it's
Obviously.
that focus on like scientific accuracy, or at least scientific plausibility, just gets thrown out the window at the end. Where, it's interesting up to a point, and then after a while, you're just kind of like, all right, we know what's going to happen. Let's just stop watching it because we got the couple of jokes in there, and then we're good. But they kind of do a lot of movie cliche, movie trope things with it that just started to bother me the more they did it, where they're discussing the stakes of what he's at and how long he can survive, and they're like, and that's if nothing goes wrong. And so you're sitting there you don't even have to be that astute of a movie watcher to understand that, okay, so the next scene, something's going to go wrong. That's exactly what happens. And those kinds of things just start to bug you. And then because they put such an emphasis on this is rooted in science and we're going to think our way through things, every little thing that doesn't make sense is just then amplified. Like, he has to drill holes in the top of the rover and then hit it with a rock to bust it out so that he has room to put the oxygenator in there. It's one of the problems that they solve. But then later on, somehow he's supposed to pretty much completely dismantle a spaceship. Like, how does he have the tools to do that? Like, is that how you guys build spaceships? Is that you just need a socket wrench and you can take off the nose cone of a...
Come on, let's be honest. You only need a Leatherman to do anything.
Pretty much Leatherman and duct tape, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's still those leaps, and I think that the leaps are harder to take because of how much of it was more rooted in like more scientific plausibility. But I do like that there is that realism in a lot of the interactions, right? Where when NASA discovers that he's still alive and they're looking at satellite images where things have moved around that shouldn't have moved around, and the director of NASA's asking questions to try and find another reason why that could possibly be the case. Like, how is this rover moved? Maybe somebody forgot to log something. The solar panels are cleaned off. Well, maybe wind blew it off. Like, they're not taking anything at face value. It's not like, well, I've got a hunch or this evidence strongly suggests this. It's let's think of every possible solution. But again, that's kind of taken aback when one of their supply missions blows up because they didn't think that the food cubes would turn into liquid and unbalance things. And then the rocket blows up. And so that's the level of precision that they're at. But then later on, it's like, oh, just definitely cut a hole in your suit for propulsion. But then you'll be fine when you get where you need to go. Like, your suit will stop releasing on, like, right? So
the idea of the rocket when they were sending the supplies up and it exploded.
Yeah.
Here's these scientists who are smart and they're thinking through all these problems, but then at this very crucial moment, we're just going to cut corners. Like, you're potentially costing money because, rocket ships take time and money to build, and you have the potential to cause serious damage, and you're going to cut a corner. No, I'm going to believe that because these people are ideally a lot of the smartest people you're going to find, they're going to think through things and they're going to plan through things, and they're not going to cut corners because lives could be at stake if they do.
And something as simple as a solid cube turning into liquid unbalances the load, which causes a vibration that causes the rocket to explode. Like that level of precision. But then later on, it's like, we think if we take the nose cone off and take all these things out and put a tarp over the top of it, we'll be fine to get through stuff.
Like
if he just jumps and somehow our precise calculations are, he'll be within a few hundred meters maybe, and they're like, whoa, he's like a few hundred kilometers off, kind of a thing. And then they've got to blow the nose cone of their ship open to decelerate. And, you start making more and more leaps, and you're just like, I'm on this ride because it's entertaining, but I was on the ride before because it was realistic, and now those two don't marry well.
So you're saying it kind of started with science, and then
it started with science, and then slowly
the wings started coming off, and
you flew too close to the sun, and now you're pivoting down to Earth, and
like I said,
and now we're in a Marvel movie.
I just, I do really like this movie. I do recommend it. I think it's a great movie. I don't think I would have watched all of it again once I got to the middle, which was a strange realization. There's a David Bowie song in the middle because, of course, there's a David Bowie song in a science fiction movie. And I was strange. I was just like, I could be done here and be okay, right? Like the first time I saw it, this was fantastic, and then the second time around, I was just like, There's just a lot of things that I start overthinking that get really nitpicky too. Like when he goes through his whole speech about planting on Mars and how he's colonized Mars because he planted and grew something on Mars. And it's like, well, technically you didn't, because you started getting into a lot of technicalities. You took Martian soil and put it inside a structure and then so you technically didn't do that. It'd be no different than bringing Martian soil back to the Earth and doing something with it. So it would be interesting to think through too, because the parallel between Pioneer Days and those frontier survival stories, like how much of those were just BS, or somebody said that they were lost in the woods in the winter and had to fight bears and all these kinds of things. How much of that really happened? How much of that is just story passed on and changed and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you really just got drunk going to the outhouse.
Yeah. Whereas this is like, he's documenting it, right? There's going to be all of his video records that, probably got picked up by NASA at some point in time. So just thinking through those different parallels, I think was really cool. I do think it's a little bit dated to its time period. Like, it's not a movie that people who don't understand like new media, YouTube and Facebook and social media, like it doesn't work without those things existing, but in that world they do, and in the world we live in they do. And so it'd be interesting to see how well this one would hold up in 10, 20 years time as those things change and evolve. Like, vlogging was probably a lot more popular in 2015 than it is now even. So is that kind of a fading? Does that connection work as well now as it did 5 years ago?
To me, it's such a good science movie, and how he's building it and how he's just figuring out problems, like trying to talk to NASA. He figures out, there's this other rover on this other portion of Mars. It's still science that he's planning, and he's remembering these things and these missions, and he's coming up with communication so that he can actually now start talking to people, and that NASA can talk to him and figure out what he needs and what he's missing. But with the luck part of it, it's very convenient that the one person who is stuck on Mars is probably the one person who would survive on Mars, because he's a botanist. He knows how to grow things or what he'll need to build all this stuff.
But he's also like a chemist and other things and other things.
Well, and he's a botanist. He put poo in dirt with potatoes. Like,
Well, I think
Yeah.
it was, but then there was generating the water, which is
It was
more
generating
chemistry,
the water, which was
not necessarily
Which-
botany.
yeah. But as well as to be an astronaut, there is more that you
Sure.
go into. for
Yeah,
those things,
there's a
but,
training.
Yeah.
But it's also very lucky that in the freak sandstorm, he doesn't end up with a life-threatening injury, that he survived that, but he woke up before he lost all his oxygen because he had a crack in his helmet. That's very lucky. There's so much luck behind the things that are going on that I wished. The thing that then would change, that I would change about this movie, is I wish that they stuck more to the science part of it and less of the, oh, it's so lucky that he survived this, the Iron Man part. Oh, it's so lucky that he happened to accurately project himself through space into the arms of his commander. I wish that it was more, that it didn't degrade into the thriller action, that it stayed more science-based, because it's what the movie started out as. And I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more if they kept it consistent.
It lost me there, right? That's where it was like, okay, the charm has worn off, and now I'm just like, yeah, okay, you're just going through the motions of a movie at this point in time, and I don't need to see a lot of these kinds of things. Like, as far as film as a medium, I think it's a little stagnant with some of those kinds of things, and that you need to figure out other ways of getting through it, which that's kind of how the writing of this was, right? The writing of it is very much that same way of, problem solution, work the problems as you go through it, which is really, it's a great way to build a film. And I think a lot of films would be better if they followed that same approach. But eventually you're just, you're like writing yourself into a corner on things. And it's like, let's move through things. I don't need to see more goofy interactions between them all. I don't need to see him cursing out NASA again because they're suggesting something stupid, kind of a thing. Like, let's get through these kinds of things. Like,
I did like it overall, and it is one that, again, I usually do recommend people at least watch a movie once. So it would be one that I would recommend, because overall it's a good science movie, and the way that it was built and the way that it actually incorporated his skills, the skills of even the other astronauts, because they're not stupid. They've been training to do this mission for who knows how long. So they're not stupid. And it's a lot of science that it was put into this. But unfortunately, it used less science towards the end of the movie and more, it's magic. He's Iron Man. He's going to fly through space and it's just going to work out. You could still create tension, but make it smarter.
Yeah. How would I change it? Like I said, just kind of tighten up the middle section. And then just, if you make the decision to stick to like plausibly scientific, maintain that throughout. Like, I think it would have been just as fine to not have the big dramatic, every problem continues to come up to get him out. Like, just let him blast off into space and be happy. Like, stop kicking him when he's down, kind of a thing, right? Like, you don't always have to pull the rug out from under him. I mean, it's kind of surprising that they ended the movie when he gets back to the spaceship and that they didn't have continuing problems throughout the entire way home, sort of thing. So,
so you wanted,
I think it would have still just been. No, I said because I said it would have been.
Well, we're tightening up the middle. It wouldn't have been
surprising if they had done that.
Oh, okay.
We're already tightening up the middle, so at that point,
I would have said I would have changed that at the end rather than continuing to have this cascading situation of failures. Like, just let him get to the rocket and let them catch him and go home. Have the amazing moment where he's sitting there in the rocket ship ready to blast off and he's starting to break down emotionally after having been alone for so long and finally realizing that he's probably going to survive this. Like, let that be the climax of the movie, not kind of cheesy action sequence after the fact. So
the way that he interacts with Earth, that is one thing I would change. And I felt like that connection between him and them didn't really contribute to the story and the plot as a whole.
Yeah, the problems that he faces are usually not because of his negligence, sort of a thing, right? Like when the greenhouse thing, the airlock pops, like that's not because he was neglecting something or he didn't do a calculation right, those kinds of things. But with NASA, it's always somebody screwed something up, right? They skipped all of the tests to make sure that everything was going to be good, so then the rocket blows up. Like
Right.
the problems at Earth are because people are stupid. The problems on Mars is because the environment is harsh, and so that doesn't jive.
So it really, to me, it felt like there was stuff happening on Earth and there was stuff happening on Mars, and then there was stuff happening on the ship at some point with the crew, and it just didn't feel very connected as a cohesive story. It almost felt like I was bouncing back and forth, and they were connected, but they were kind of, I mean, they kind of had their own problems, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like it was all connected, which is funny because that was kind of what the story was driving to in the end, where he returns kind of as this almost as this unifying hero of the world, where everyone was celebrating that he came back. I did have a problem with the way that all unfolded, with China's just like, oh yeah, we totally could have this rocket ready to go and we could like help him out, and like, let's give him a phone call. And like, it felt a little like, it's like, let's throw this into the story. Let's not like get into it at all. It'll just like, this will be icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So that felt a little flimsy. I mean, when you're pushing 2.5 hours or so for a film, like, do we really need that? Like, but that drives to that whole unifying the entire world thing. The feel goods, right? That they're trying to make everyone get to.
That's why I say it's the fan fiction for science nerds, because the thought that people would fill up Times Square to watch, them launch the rockets off or try and go get them, like, no, that's not the case. Like, the reality is there's, there are a lot of people out there who do watch these things, but Times Square is not getting filled up to watch a rocket blast off. Like, unfortunately, that's not the world we live in.
Like I said, it starts out in a good place, and then, as you said, the middle section could just be cut out for the most part. And so I almost see it goes, and then it dips down, and then at the end, it's like, well, we got a little action, so it comes up a little bit, and that's where it all resolves. But it never makes it back all the way up. Yeah. Like, it starts out good, and then it's just
in comparison, even those kind of that kind of action scene is more just like, here's the bright flashy lights to keep you entertained because you're still here. It doesn't really feel as good as the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Anyway, unless anybody else has anything more pressing they want to talk about to drag out this podcast as long as the movie.
No, that's it.
I think we'll wrap it there. So, thanks again for sticking this one out. Like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. Let us know down below what we should watch. Tell us your thoughts on The Martian. Also calculate, because I'm sure somebody has already done this, but calculate how much money has been spent in movies to save Matt Damon, because that seems to be a thing with him. So, and we'll catch you in the next one. Adios.
See ya.